Thank you for tuning in to episode number 69 of The Grail, coming to you today, October 5th, 2022. I am in a hotel room in El Paso, Texas, currently on the Marcus King tour, and we are just past the halfway mark, about to do Phoenix tomorrow, and then Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle. That is the run this week, and it's been the shows have just been fantastic in the last few weeks. The Ryman, the Tabernacle. Last night we were in Austin, Texas at Stubbs, and just incredible. And I want to thank everybody for joining me here on the Grail. I've had an opportunity to pick up some new guests while I'm out here on the road, including today, Mr. Walter Carter, the owner of Carter Vintage in Nashville, one of the newer vintage shops, but exploded onto the scene, and it's just been red hot. A lot of it has to do with their incredible videos on Instagram, and the other half has to do with their reputation and being in the guitar game for most of their lives. It was an honor to talk to Walter, and man, this guy just constantly has amazing gear coming in and out of that shop. While I was there were multiple mind-boggling guitars, and you'll hear all about them on the episode. Also, I met a lot of cool people that worked there, including my man Poncho and Rich Head. He doesn't work there, but he is the owner of this incredible 60 flame top that we talk about on the podcast. That was just insane. It was great to be in Nashville. I got to go hang out with Tom Murphy. I went and saw my man Mark over at the Gibson Garage, Mark Agnesi, and saw Big Ed, the early Carina Explorer, well documented. That's the key word in the vintage guitar world, my friends, well documented. So sit back and enjoy this episode that is brought to you by my one-stop shop for all my denim, boots, and leathers, Standard and Strange. Standard and Strange has shops in New York, Berkeley, and where else? New Mexico. But they have a great Instagram, and they have a great website, and they will ship anywhere around the world. You're looking for leather jackets, boots, denim, all of the good stuff. The selection is mind-boggling. Check them out, standardandstrange.com on the web and on your Instagram. All right, let's get into it. Thank you, everybody. The Grail is here, number 69, with Walter Carter. All right, here we are, another episode of The Grail, and I am sitting with a vintage guitar legend today. Introduce yourself, my man.
I'm Walter Carter, co-founder of Carter Vintage Guitars in Nashville, author of a bunch of books on old guitars.
Man, you know, I got to tell you something. I've been in vintage guitars all my life, and, not all my life, but somewhere from the 20s, and now here I am, 56. And I got to tell you, Instagram has done the world for vintage guitars and your shop, because I didn't really know about you until like 5 years ago. You know, I'm LA, so it's Albert, Guitars R Us when I'm growing up. It was Norm, of course, my main man. And then there was I worked at Real Guitars in San Fran. And then there was like Lloyd at Vintage. And then there was, Elliot Rumble Seat and that kind of stuff. But that Instagram has really brought everybody out there, huh?
Yeah, it's been great for us. We haven't been in business as long as those guys, just coming up to 10 years. So those are like even though they're about my age, that's a first generation of vintage dealers. And I would consider myself really in the second generation, business-wise especially. So, you wouldn't have heard of us growing up. because my wife and I worked for another dealer through most of that time.
Was it growing?
It was. Yeah. Who's that? Yeah, that guy. Yeah, he's still right. He's still down the street now. But we really were fortunate to come along right when social media was booming. We were able to put up videos on YouTube at no cost. People asked to see our little video studio, and I just pulled out the little Nikon where you hit the red button that says record. That was it. And we had people calling us or texting us saying, cut back on the reverb. You guys, your mixes are horrible. And it's like, we weren't doing anything. That's just the way the room was. We had so few guitars that it was really a super live room. And so we got a lot of initial traction from that. And then Instagram, it helped. Not only it helped everybody. You just take a picture and throw it up online, and for better or worse, everybody sees it. And for us, it's been better.
Now, of course, I've had the books that you've wrote and everything. How and at what year do you get into guitars?
Well, I always played. And since I was about 11.
Out here in Nashville?
No, I grew up in North Carolina.
Oh,
Chapel
cool.
Hill. So I started playing first on baritone ukulele at that time, and then it was just folk music guitar kind of player through the
into Dylan and stuff like that.
Yeah, and really as far back as the Kingston Trio.
Oh wow, cool.
Then Peter, Paul and Mary, and then Dylan, and then sort of branching out. And I played other instruments, trumpet and saxophone. So I was playing in bands that did all different kinds of music, mostly soul music at that time. So I was really exposed to a lot of other things, and was a fan of Beatles and the Stones and all kinds of rock and roll. Except on guitar, it was still pretty much folk music, leading into a songwriter type of guitar playing. And that's I came to Nashville at the age of 21 back in 1971 as a songwriter. So that was the sort of the level and the focus of my guitar playing. I was concentrating on being a songwriter from that point on, and I was not even in the same ballpark to think about being a guitar player in Nashville. But that was really the limit of my association with guitars. I saw people like, say, bluegrassers with really cool old Martins. So I had some sense of vintage guitars. And I saw rock. I worked at the Exit Inn for a while, so I saw all kinds of acts coming through there, and some of the players had some cool old electrics too. But I didn't really know much about guitars other than the ones that I owned until I started working for Grail, and that was in right at the end of 1987.
Wow.
And at that time, Fret's magazine was going out of business. Gruen knew about that and wanted to start a magazine of his own. So he hired me to edit such a magazine. And I had a newspaper background by that time also, and was doing freelance writing. And so it was sort of immersion by fire, trial by fire in the vintage business. The magazine itself didn't pan out, but in the course of trying to get stuff ready for that, I talked to a bunch of vintage dealers, learned quickly about vintage guitars, started making notes for other kinds of publications that became first Gruen's Guide to Vintage Guitars. I did pretty much all the research and the writing on that book, and George contributed, of course. He could spout off most of the important facts about guitars just off the top of his head by that time, because there weren't any reference books to speak of.
Right.
And then we did 2 more coffee table books. And at that time, I went on to Gibson, where I became a historian. Was hired to write a book on the 100th anniversary of Gibson. So by that time, I was pretty steeped in vintage guitars, but it came late. So I was in my late 30s by the time I really got into it. Then I couldn't get out of it.
So once you start doing all that, do you also become kind of like a seller at Gruen and going out and buying at shows and scouting stuff?
I did not do too much buying and selling there. I was busy with the research and the writing. But in the meantime, my wife came on in 1988 as the bookkeeper. And I left in 93, but she stayed on. And eventually started moving into sales. Just as people would come to talk to her about guitars, or they'd maybe be abandoned by a salesperson. And she found out that with a little bit of knowledge, she could sell some vintage guitars. So she became one of the top, if not the top, salesperson there during some periods.
That's wild to hear, because especially in the guitar store world, you never see females working there.
Not too many.
And then when people come in, they're like, well, she doesn't know what she's talking about. That's a woman. I'm going to go over here to talk to this dude. And you're talking to some dude that doesn't know nothing, you know?
That's right. If there's a woman in there, she probably knows something.
Yeah, exactly.
And probably knows more than you do.
But you know what I mean? The dumb people's train of thought, like if they went to an auto place and a woman was talking to them about their car or whatever, they're just so dumb, no way. But I've met women that know everything about cars and guitars or watches, and they have sometimes way more knowledge than the dude in there,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's often the case. If they've gone far enough and worked hard enough to be able to sell vintage guitars, you can be sure they know their stuff. So by the time we opened the store here, Christy had been working there for 25 years. I had gone back for another 5 or maybe 7 year.
When you first left, where did you go?
Here.
In 93.
When I first left Grail and went to Gibson.
Oh, Gibson. So you're working at Gibson when they start like the historic?
Yeah.
And did you know Rich Head?
I sure did.
Wow, because Rich Head is a guy that has brought down a 60 burst here that is going to be auctioned off, and there's an Instagram on it called Blessing Burst.
Yeah. Richard called it the blessing because it was a blessing to him when he bought it.
Yeah. He bought it for $350 when he was 16 years old.
Yeah, back in the 60s.
And Marcus played it last night on stage at the Ryman. And you know this and I know this. I've played maybe 10 bursts in my life, and I'm sure you've had a bunch in here, of course, the Red Eye being one of them.
Right.
But there are a bunch of duds in the 59 world. They're just like another guitar, but the magic ones are magic.
Yeah, well, his is one of those.
Oh, my God. Marcus plugged it in, and I was like, oh, that's just Jimmy Page right there.
Yeah.
Because, some could have rewound pickups, some could have dead pickups, some could have dead wood.
Yeah.
Some just have no flame or flat top. They're all different.
Well, I think Marcus warned us that since it was being taped and recorded live, he might not want to play it if it wasn't any good.
Right.
And he ended up playing it a lot.
Oh, yeah. But, man, he plugged it in, and the entire Ryman, all the people at the sound check, our heads were popping off, actually.
Right.
And I've got some incredible video I posted up of them doing Allman Brothers, Elizabeth Reed, and it's just screaming with beautiful tone.
Yeah.
Man. I mean, in the 2 days I've been here, I've seen like $3 million in guitars, some of the greatest ever. I saw Big Ed, the Explorer. Then I saw Rich's Blessing Burst. And then just now, the Black 59.
Right. They just walked in yesterday afternoon.
Unreal.
Happens all the time.
So we're going to get into that in a minute because I don't want to jump forward. But So anyway, you're at Gibson, and what are you doing there?
Well, hired to write a book on the 100-year history of the company, which occurred in 1994.
Right.
And during that time, they started up their website. So I was helping those guys with some material. I wasn't at that time, initially at least, in charge of the web group, and I was doing some of the press releases and just general editorial stuff. I also wrote a book on Epiphone while I was there, and then gradually I was in a position that when I came back, it was described as an editorial director. I don't remember what title I had, if any, the first time around. Probably just a general historian title as a catch-all, which allowed me, and most of the stuff I did for the website was looking through the archives and just finding cool stuff.
Right. Now, when Gibson I look at it as, they're kind of hurting in the late 70s. They got the bowling ball, 700-pound Les Pauls. They got a bunch of weird stuff. It's just like Fender. They're shooting polyurethane. There's just seems to be no care. Charvel and Jackson start to hit, and Gibson's really hurting. And then it seems to be right around 87, 88, when Slash starts to play it, it gives them their next boost. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, the guys that took over in '86, Henry Juskowitz and Dave Berriman, and a third partner for a short time, they're rightfully given credit for reviving the company that was on its last leg, but they also came in at a time when the guitar market was about to surge. So they were fortunate with their timing, and certainly deserving of the credit that they get. But they came in at an opportune time for buying a struggling guitar company.
Yeah, well, MTV.
Yeah.
So you're seeing guitars. Right. Other than magazines. So now you're seeing everything people are playing. It's a lot like Harley. Harley's getting ready to tank.
Yeah.
Then the employees buy it back, and all of a sudden, they love the company. And that's kind of like, those two guys, and then Slash playing it because they loved Aerosmith.
Well, Harley was a model for Henry, for a company, for a lifestyle company. And when I first came aboard to do the Gibson book, one of the first things he asked me to look at was a book that somebody had just done on Harley. So he revived the company. And also the other influence from Harley, there was a dealer right down the street from Gibson headquarters at that time, and they had a restaurant there. And so a lot of the Gibson upper people had Harleys that they would ride on Sunday morning. And they would go there for lunch, so I would tag along sometimes. And you look at the showroom at that time, there were maybe 4 bikes there, and 8 or 10,000 square feet of gear and
shirts.
Yeah, shirts for kids, leathers for kids, every possible
and knickknacks to bolt onto your bike.
Just merchandise, and that was one thing that Henry aspired to, is to be able to. Is for the Gibson brand to have that kind of broad appeal beyond just the guitar, just the product itself.
That's a wise move.
Yeah.
So you go back to Gruen, and you end up there for a long time, right?
Well, I went back to Gibson. I took about 3 years off and wrote some more songs and did some freelance stuff. Then came back to Gibson for 5 years.
During the historic launch?
No, this was later. This was like in 01.
Oh, wow.
So I was there 93 to 98, and that's when the historic line was launched with our guy, Richard Head, ramrodding that through. And then when I came back, it was right about the time Gibson acquired Baldwin Pianos. So the marketing director at that time had just come in from Baldwin, and that was initially, I think, what they had in mind for me to do is help launch Baldwin as a Gibson brand. It didn't work out that way, but I stayed, and at times I had the internet group under me. At times I was creative director with all the graphic artists under me, and just in general was sort of. I just told people I was like lord over the written word with whatever came out from Gibson. I wrote some of the ads, most of the catalog copy, press releases, just anything that needed to be done.
That's amazing, man. It's this town it's unreal how much guitar is in this town.
Right.
And especially now, again, I feel like if you're going to play music, whether it be rock and roll, country, singer-songwriter, you have to live in L.A. now. In Nashville, where before it was L.A. or New York.
Right.
And now this is really the last stop, I think. If you're going to play music, you need to be in this town, because this is where everybody kind of came from, like Brad Whitford from Aerosmith moving here. And, all these rock and rollers started coming out here. And it is one of the last spots, right?
Yeah, and one of the big advantages to Nashville is this relative small size compared to New York or L.A. you don't. It's not going to take you 30 minutes or an hour to get to a studio. If you have a session ending at 10 o'clock, ends at 1, if you got another session at 2, you're not going to have any problem making it.
Yeah.
And there's a handful, maybe a big handful of venues and places where songwriters and up and coming musicians are going to hang out. Everybody knows everybody here.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing, especially as one person gets ahead, they bring others with them. And it's a real, it's not a cutthroat competitive community here. It's sort of, it's more like, having old Army buddies around. Everybody's in it together.
That's kind of cool, man. There was that interesting period in the mid-'90s. I started kind of flipping guitars, buying them, mostly not to make money, but to try to get up to my Grail pieces,
right.
52 Telly, 54 all gold. I never got to the 59 because even by then they were too much money,
Yeah.
But there was this time where, let's say a TV special, 58, would go for like $5,000. And then at one point, it seemed like the Burst Brothers, Guitar Center Hollywood, was like, we're just going to put up insane prices, and this is what it's going to be for now on. So you go in and like a special would be $16,000. You're like, wait a minute, those are $3,500.
I think prices have always been insane. If you don't have a lot of money and you're trying to reach something, and if it was $5,000 a couple of years ago and now you've saved up $5,000, it's 10.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's always been complaints that the collectors keep the guitars out of reach of musicians. There's the counter argument that that's a good thing because the guitars don't get beat up and they get preserved in collections. But prices have always been high. I mean, I've seen old listings from the 70s where an Explorer or a Burst is like $1,500.
Yeah.
But a used Les Paul is $150 or $200. So it seems it was out of reach then.
Yeah.
Just as it seems now, and people are always. I think we're in a period right now where prices have been going crazy. I don't really know why, but it could be some perceived scarcity of instruments, and that's not really. They're not too scarce, and of course, high prices bring them out of the woodwork.
Yeah,
for
like
people
today,
who've been holding on to them.
That black 59.
Yeah.
At what point do you start seeing an interesting thing that Mark told me yesterday over at Gibson? There's 14 real Carina Explorers, but there's like 40 accounted for out there.
Yeah.
At what point are you at Gruen? Because to me, I don't think it really happens until the stuff gets crazy, where you start to see some insanely good fakes.
Yeah, there have been a few good fakers all along. You still don't see very many really good ones that are just impossible to see that they're fake. I think the problem with the Carina stuff, people started making fakes in the 90s, I guess, and we heard from a dealer who was in Atlanta but was talking about some people in Florida, and told us that people were making the fakes, separating the cases from the real thing.
Right.
Putting a real case with a fake.
That's what gives it the legitimacy, because the case is rarer than the guitar.
Yeah, so all of a sudden, one of the things that you would ask if somebody says, I've got a V or an Explorer, is the case still with it? Oh, yeah. Okay, it's
got to be real.
Yeah.
Right.
So swapping cases out probably established some of the fakes as as an exemplary guitar for a real one. So who knows? Unless you've got just ironclad provenance, and there are some out there. I know John Peden has a V, the photographer in New York, and who collects a lot of stuff. He's got a V that Gibson used for as a model for the historic reissues, and I saw it when it was at Gibson. John has it back now. He has shown me pictures of the original owner all the way through the ownership.
Yeah.
That guitar is real.
Fully documented.
Yes, yeah, as documented as you can possibly get. That's what you really need if you're going to be sure. My uncle Jed played it in bands in Southwest Missouri in the 40s or 50s, that kind of story. And then it just came, my cousin had it and gave it to me. No,
Yeah.
that bears more research. Sometimes those stories are true.
Yeah. What's interesting too was at the time where Gibson had trailed off from their quality, and then people like Max came around and started making these incredible Les Pauls.
Yeah.
Which it was funny. I was talking to Murphy yesterday, and he goes, "Maxes were really cool, but now why would you buy one? They're like 14 or 20 grand when you could actually just get a crushing Murphy Lab for like $7,500.
Right. Well, people will buy a Max because they think they may be able to sell it as not a Max at some time. I don't know that he's as active as he once was, but he was the legendary. Nobody knew his real name at that time.
Yeah.
And we'll just leave it that way. But he was the first to really emerge. Of course, if you're making fakes, you don't want to emerge.
Yeah, right.
But it's hard to say where those lie in the grand scheme of things now. I guess there's some value, some collectible value in the good fakes.
Well, I mean, in the scarcity, so-called scarcity of Brazilian rosewood, that seems to be the main piece that everybody wants because everything else is kind of theirs right now still. Mm-hmm. Some nitro, the bumblebee caps, the pots, and all that. So if you could, get a rosewood fretboard and a fairly incredible top and stuff, you'd be on your way, like those dudes in Florida that do those makeovers.
Right. There's a good several people doing makeovers.
Yeah, now. Incredible ones.
Yeah. And there's Brazilian out there. I don't know how much of it you can find that's pre-cut into fingerboards, but the acoustic guys don't seem to be having any problem finding Brazilian.
Yeah, I'm playing that Collins right over there that you got. It's Brazilian. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Beautiful pieces of wood.
Right.
So your work at Gibson, then you go back to Gruen, and at what point do you say, all right, let's open our own shop? And first of all, the building is cool. And,
my wife had been there almost pushing 25 years, and then I'd been there 5 years one time and 7 years on this second time around. So, at some point, it's inevitable you think you can do a better job than the guy you're working for.
Of course.
And that just, we just kept feeling that way more and more. And she is 10 years younger than me and was really just feeling that she needed to get out on her own. This building came up for sale. We weren't the first. We didn't really have an inside track on it, but we thought it would be a good size for us. And actually, we thought it would be kind of overkill. We were thinking of maybe getting some other vendors in here to help fill up the space. And so it came on the market, and we put some money down to tie up the building, still not knowing. We just thought it was a good deal, a good business deal to buy it, and not knowing that we were going to be necessarily putting a guitar store in here. But then circumstances led to our departure, and there we were at the end of 2012 with closing on this building, no job anymore.
Ooh.
And running down to it was right before the Arlington show. We went down there with some hot off the presses business cards that said, I think they said Carter Vintage. They might have said Carter Guitars. But we went down just to let people know we were going to be on our own. And we closed on the building, got some plans to renovate it, and got that started around the first of the year. And in the meantime, just worked out of our house. And we were just really fortunate. We thought that our personal guitars would carry us through, and we put some of them up for sale, and didn't do so well with them. But other people, either old friends or people we didn't even know, knew of us and trusted us, and would send us guitars. So we were doing fairly well out of the house by the time we could finally open the store, which was in June of 2013.
It's a big place. I mean, if you walked in here and there was only like 15 guitars, it would be insanely empty.
Well, that's about what we had. A little bit more than that when we opened up, but we had nothing, no racks on the floor with anything, and we had a few more couches and places to sit.
Yeah,
and we were putting the flat tops. I guess the electrics we were even shorter on, but we put hooks on the wall and we laid the guitars flat against the wall and spread them out. And,
then it looks like you got merch.
It looked like we got something.
Yeah.
And there's actually a stage up in the front of the room that nobody sees now because it's been covered with amps for the last 7 or 8 years. But that was empty at the time, but it filled up pretty fast.
What did this building used to be?
It was just housed a store that sold paper of all kinds, retail paper.
Oh, wow.
I mean, basically like a wholesale kind of thing. Teachers would come here and buy poster board and stuff. The front part of it was a little sales counter and offices. The back looked like Silence of the Lambs torture chamber or something. A lot of just metal racks and
just a late night Nashville bondage club.
Yeah. And a couple of industrial type of gas heaters like you'd find in an auto shop that we had to get rid of course. They dry guitar right out. So it was basically a gut job, and we put up a couple of walls and walled off space in the back for repair. Opened it right back up.
So you're open, you're selling some guitars. Do you remember who the first maybe like celebrity was that came in?
It was Chris Stapleton.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the door, this was one long room. I think that our lights were off by this time. And there was a door outside in the far back corner, and it opened up. And some people came walking in, and we couldn't really tell who it was because they were silhouetted. And it turns out it was Chris and his wife, Morgan, and I think her parents. And I believe they had eaten lunch at Arnold's restaurant next door to us. And they came, and we knew Chris, and he came walking in, and I don't even think there were any wall studs up yet. It was just a mess, a demo mess, and he said, "Oh, this is going to be great." Well, I'm looking around, I can see, and I'm thinking, boy, I can't yet, but he turned out to be right. So.
Do you know where his obsession with the Jazz Master comes from? Did he ever talk to you about that?
No, I do not. I don't know why he suddenly picked it up, because he's not the heavy strummer, thrasher type. I guess he can.
Yeah.
But he's, I don't want to say better or more of a player than that, but that's, he's the lead player in his band.
He is.
So it's not just a statement that he's trying to make, holding a sort of a punk guitar. But I don't know the answer.
When you get a Jazz Master, like there's an incredible one. I think it's there.
Yeah.
It was in here now.
It's just sold. The 62 or 3. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Who bought that? I thought for sure he's just going to buy that.
No, it was an artist. No, he didn't. I don't know why he didn't buy it either.
God,
actually, there's another one there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it looks similar to that. Oh no, that's the one I saw yesterday. Yeah, just it was Olympic white. It's completely tobacco stained, and the logo. What do you think caused that logo to do that sticker like that?
Well, it's over the finish, so that's why it's.
Oh, I got you.
Oops. Yeah, the logos sometimes stand out on fenders as the lacquer fades everywhere else except for under the logo.
There was a time where I could just look at a 52 telly and know every piece that was wrong or missing. Flat screws are supposed to be here. Phillips here and all that. When somebody comes in with a guitar, can you still just look at it, or your wife, and go, "Oh, this has got a change switch tip. The tuners are changed," all that instantly?
Well, you get sort of an intuition about things, especially finishes. And sometimes somebody's done something to a finish where you can only go, that just doesn't look right.
Yeah.
Something about it, and you may not even realize what it is. And eventually you'll probably find the smoking gun for whatever's been done. Just looking in cavities and looking under a black light. But yeah, you get a feel for things. Looking at a harness, the wiring may be pretty clean, but something just doesn't look right.
Yeah.
And
blotchy solders.
Yeah.
Sanded bodies is what I always noticed. People back in the day, they'd sand them and the bodies would be rounded.
Yeah. Or there'd be a little bit of a divot in the middle of of the body. But you just you get to where some things stand out and some things you'll look at and it'll be not seeing the forest for the trees. There's a marten that we have here now, and for some reason, and it's documented with pictures from the original owner, the fingerboard markers are 1 fret off.
Whoa.
The one that's
it's like a second.
Yeah, well, I think it was ordered that way. You would expect the marker at the 3rd fret, it's at the 4th. So it's the markers are at 4, 6, 8, and 11.
So, can you imagine you're on stage?
Well, yeah. Dave Rawlings came in and tried it out, and I mean the side dots are actually in the right at 5 and 7, but he hit a chord based on where the markers were, and it was a disaster. That guitar was here. Everybody looked at it, and we made notes about other things that might have been changed, and it was a Hawaiian guitar that had been converted, and all kinds of things to notice about it. And it wasn't until Rawlings played the wrong chord on it that we said, that's the first thing we should have seen.
Yeah.
That the markers are in the wrong place. So sometimes you get so wrapped up in details you don't see a major thing like that.
So once you're open and you're rolling, it starts to pick up. At what point do you start to see people bringing in some of this stuff like the Ed King Red Eye and 59s and all of this stuff start rolling through here? At what point does that happen?
Well, it started just a few months in. People would just bring stuff or bring friends in. J.D. Simo came in. I think maybe Gary Bohannon, who worked in our shop and was J.D.'s tech for a short time. I think he brought J.D. in, and J.D. said, "Well, you ought to get with Ed King." So, I'll bring him in. And so then here's Ed.
Wow.
And he didn't bring us Red Eye right away.
Yeah.
But when he was ready to thin out the herd a little bit, Red Eye was one of them.
Wow.
And it just, I don't know how or why, there wasn't any one particular thing. It's just reputation. And the fact that we seemed to be able to sell guitars, and we knew a lot of people through the years, and so people would trust us with good stuff. We got the first burst came in.
Yeah, the 3-piece top one.
Yeah,
that was weird, huh?
And that was the guy had taken it down the street and was turned away. They thought it was a 70s guitar.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course, because back when they had bad tops, it would become a gold top or a Black Beauty.
Yeah, and he had gone back to Memphis, and he might have posted something online, and somebody said, "Go to Carter's," and next thing you know, he's here with it. And I knew as soon as I saw the serial number from having seen that number in the Gibson ledgers exactly what it was. And but that was, again, it's sort of out of the blue. The same thing we got in at one point, and I don't think it ever made any list or our website. The first Gibson Granada 5-string banjo that had the specs that Earl Scruggs had.
Whoa.
Flathead tone ring, 1-piece flange, and it was the first of the first batch with that. And those were people in Huntsville, Alabama, who they did call ahead, and I told them to come up on a Sunday so that other stores would be closed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, wise move. So they don't stop somewhere first by accident.
Yeah. And so we were able, they wanted to sell it outright, and we wrote a pretty big check and then told our banker that's coming through.
Yeah.
And I think Christy had it sold by the end of the day.
Wow.
But how they found out about us, I'm not. Somebody in Huntsville probably said, "Well," they said they had gotten a few insulting offers that made them suspicious that it might be worth more.
Yeah, right.
The woman who owned it, whose father had it, almost fainted when we made the offer that we did. So she had not been offered anything in that range, but somebody recommended us, and that's the story behind everything here.
Now, Gibson, they have kept some incredible charts and documents and logs, right?
Well, yeah, not as complete as everybody would prefer. They kept daily shipping logs all through. I don't know when they started. The earliest one that survives starts in 1935.
Whoa.
And Gibson may not actually have that particular one, but copies of it have gotten around. And they kept those a running log of shipments through the 50s. And they also, in the 50s, when they started using the A prefix numbers on arch tops and flat high-end flat tops, they kept that in a separate book. And then in the 60s, they switched, and it was strictly serial number logs. They would stamp, 1 to 1,000 in a book and then fill them in as the guitars were shipped. So there are those records, and there are some missing books, particularly the one from I don't know if it's a missing book, but there are no shipping records from July of 58 through the end of the 60s until they started the serial number until 61. So
would that cover the...
that's all the bursts.
Yeah, damn.
Yeah, they had only logged in the first two, which were slashes, which is 84096, and then the one we had, which is 84087, I think, or 89.
A slash has number 2?
Yeah.
Wow.
He thought he had number 1, and Gibson has also done a reissue of his and calling it number 1. But they know.
Yeah. Well, number 1 with a proper top.
A little, that has to be qualified that way.
Because it's funny is if I had a choice between slashes, not being slashes, or number 1, I would take not a 3-piece top.
Right. Yeah.
Because everybody's always going to go like, oh. It's the first one, though. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Hey, look at this one over here, you know. Let me ask you, today I'm here, and this black 59 comes in.
Right.
And me being, love 59s and 58s. When you first hear about something like this, are you like, well, that's not real? Because nobody sees a black 59, Well,
the first thing I asked, where'd you get it? And the guy who brought it in, his father bought it, new.
Man.
And there's documentation that he can answer that question about where it came from.
Wow.
So that's the first thing you ask, and then you've got to look at it and see what was done to it, and also try to look for some evidence that maybe the story isn't true in the finish. But we looked it over. There was no evidence that it was not black from day one.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah. Well, there's one other one out there. Bonamassa has one.
Yeah, because I just sent the guitar over to Mark at Gibson. I said, hey, come buy this today.
Yeah.
Immediately I go, I think it's only one. He goes, no, actually, Bonamassa has one.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, really?
His is a 60. It's not as good.
Right. A 60, it's not then. It's in my eyes, it's a slim neck. But also Bonamassa had those weird brown ones. Mm-hmm. So when that kind of stuff comes up, in I think it was the P90 56s or something, they were brown.
Yeah.
But when that kind of stuff comes up, it's kind of exciting because there were maybe 2, 3, 1 in the world, and if it's still around, it's in somebody's house, and then one day it comes out, and we find out, oh, back then Gibson did do something crazy like this.
Right.
Now, I guess the story was he couldn't afford the burst or the Black Beauty.
Right.
So he wanted
a black guitar.
Yeah, because I guess he was wearing it with a tuxedo or something. I don't know. And then because it was covered in vintage guitar.
Right.
And then he has him paint it black. And it could be the coolest guitar I've seen in many, many, many years.
Well, it's certainly almost unique.
Yeah.
It's as close to being a one-off as you can get, being as far as we know.
Right.
And it's really cool. It's with something like that, there's a huge dilemma in how to price it.
Right. That's what I wanted to ask you.
The one element that makes a difference of 100,000 or more in pricing those is the top, and it does not have that element.
Right.
So,
but then the scarcity of it
it
makes
rarity,
up for that.
Yeah, the rarity offsets it. We think it will.
So it came in yesterday, and you're looking at it for a few hours, and you're thinking about it. Are you going back and forth with the offer of with the owner of like, what if we do this number? How do you come up with the number on this particular guitar?
Well,
or do you just put it out there to, say, Bonamassa and 10 of the big guys out there that collect and go, what is this worth to you?
Well, we'll put a price on it. We don't ever put stuff out and say, oh, we're taking offers.
Right.
Because that, to me, that's infuriating as a customer. You know, and is it for sale or not? You know, put a price on it if you want to sell it. So, yeah, I went through at length with the owner of the guitar, just sort of all the aspects and angles that you would look at in pricing it. And he had a price in mind, and I don't know how serious any previous offers have been that he's fielded, but he's had a few. So we settled on a price of $500,000.
Man, and to me it sounds pretty fair.
Yeah.
If you were a super collector, and because what do you think that Rich's 60 is going to go for around?
Oh, it's hard to say.
Right.
But,
it's not celebrity owned.
Right.
But it's screaming.
Well, it's got a big
headstock.
Yeah. Well, the whole back of the neck
and the truss rod
has a big spline in it. Yeah. I don't know. It could go that high in an auction kind of situation.
Right.
Or with a benevolent buyer, because every penny of that money is going to go to the charity.
That's great.
Homes for our troops. Don't want to mess it up, but so it's hard to say in that case what it might bring. I think on its own it wouldn't bring $500,000 because of the big neck issue.
Right.
But it's got a really nice top.
Ooh.
It's not what people call lawyer burst.
Yeah.
Which is sort of the overkill, and it's not plain. The red is pretty much faded out, so it's what people call lemon burst, and it's one of the greatest tops I've ever seen for my taste.
It looks like Gary Rosington's to me, almost exact.
Yeah.
When I first saw it, I thought it was Rosington's.
Yeah.
Because I saw that in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I went in there; they had it in the back room. I go, "What are you doing? You got the best guitar here in the back."
Yeah.
What do you think, out of your time here, who do you think has the best burst? Because I know Paul Stanley owned the lightest one ever, and he sold it. Albert at Guitars R Us had it or something. But out of the ones you've seen,
gosh, I don't know. I think you can make a judgment just based on aesthetics, but that's not, to me, that's not going to be necessarily the best one.
Right.
And I've only played a handful through the years, so I'm almost going towards the red eye.
Yeah.
Just because, in my experience, I would say that's the best.
It's so unique,
but
too.
only in my experience. And that's pretty limited. There are guys who've seen more many people who have played more bursts than I have.
Yeah. You got Joe on speed dial?
I just might.
I went to his house, man, and I was just like, I don't even know what to say, dude. It's just such an overload.
Yeah.
I'm a comedian, and somebody told me one time, they said, look, it's good to have edgy jokes, but you don't want your whole set edgy, or you've got no edge now.
Right.
And I was like, it's good to have some vintage stuff, but now you have so much, I don't even see the greatness of it. It's just like, okay, you own it all. It's wild. Just like, holy smokes, all the Brown amps, all the Marshalls, I get it, though. People get that fever. And, it's a blessing and a curse of this podcast. Once in a while, I'll have a guitar guy on, and then for the next 5 months, people are trying to offer, you should have such and such on. And this guy, it's not a guitar podcast. There's
Right.
tons of guitar podcasts out there.
Yeah.
Dive in, you know? It's people love guitars. And during COVID, it really caught fire again.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
guitars and records.
Well, we took a big dive in business, and then it started coming back, and then
Yeah.
it just shot past the pre-COVID mark. It was pretty rough right off the bat. I think the vintage dealers took it a lot harder than the people who were selling new guitars. They didn't seem to miss a step.
Right.
People were sitting home and time
With
to
those
take
checks.
up guitar, yeah, or time to step up and buy a better guitar. But for us, our business immediately dropped to right at 50% of what we've been doing, but almost immediately then started climbing back up.
Yeah. Also, incredible videos, man. I want to give you a shout out because
thanks.
I love watching those every day, and especially when you get something like Marcus and Billy Strings playing or
Yeah.
something really unique, beautiful, young guys. You know, this young people playing guitar at a high level is extremely exciting to me because it's not the same people,
Right.
and they're, you know.
Well, that goes back to our no budget days.
Yeah.
Not even low. It was, you know, if somebody came in who could play, mind if we just shoot a video?
Yeah.
And we had Anna Claire Stockhoff who did some of the early videos and just tore through some fiddle tunes and just anybody. And people, after a little bit, people would come in, and David Grisman and his wife were in here, and I was a little hesitant, but Christy's shameless usually, and said, "Yeah, would y'all like to do a video?" And he goes, you know, "Hey man, I thought you never asked."
Yeah.
And then the other part of it is like, "Well, what do you want me to play? What do you want me to promote here?" I said, "Whatever you want to. Pick any guitar you want and play whatever you want. Don't say this is the way the E string sounds, and here's the B string, and here's a G chord." We made sure we didn't do anything like that because that's what everybody else was doing at the time.
Right.
We just wanted to show people having a good time in our shop.
I might have to do a comedy set on there.
Well, that'd be great.
How funny would that be? It might be like piss them off though. They'd be like, "What is this guy? Get the guitars on!"
No, well, put a guitar in your hand and you're golden.
Oh
there.
no, I'm not a guitar comic. Ooh. So you've sold the place,
We sold the business about 6 months ago,
right?
and we found it impossible to try to just cut back gradually. So now we have to, and we're phasing out into I don't know where we're exactly going to go.
So you sold the building and the business?
No, we still own the building.
Oh, God, you sold the business.
Yeah, we sold the business to the North American Guitar, which is the company that bought what had been Cotton Music here in Nashville. And Cotton had been in business since '61.
Yeah.
And probably at the time the longest established guitar store in town. And I don't know, the new owners recognize what we built and are trying to preserve most of that, and at the same time take it forward. Our website presence is more robust now than it was, and I think in terms of things like that, software, sort of behind the scenes and production issues, and they've taken it forward. I told everybody at the time we were a vintage guitar store and we had vintage software.
Yeah.
There are things like that.
Yeah.
Christy and I are, like I said, just phasing out. And
So you guys will be out here in a few months.
Yeah.
And you're just going to retire?
well, from the guitar business, at least for a while.
Right. Is there a no compete clause in the deal?
Well, I don't want to talk about details.
Right. I got you. Yeah.
But we'll just we'll be doing other things. We basically have not traveled for the last 10 years except a few business related things, or say a NAMM trip where we could stretch another day or two on one end of the trip or another. We've not had a vacation a real vacation during all that time. And it also curtailed, as COVID did also, my mother's assisted living in Atlanta, and we weren't able to travel there either. So we've just got some catching up to do on a lot of levels.
Wow, man. Well, I got to tell you, it was an honor to talk to you.
Well, my
And I'm one of the thousands and thousands of people that enjoy each day flicking through and going, oh my God, another 59 in there. What is going on here? You know, or look at that 52 tally.
Well, they keep coming in, and these are not, for the most part, there's some people, oh yeah, we've known this guy forever. We know he's got these guitars. We may have sold him some.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise in those cases when that kind of guitar comes back in. But a lot of the good stuff it's word of mouth.
Yeah.
People that we don't know have asked somebody, I wonder where I should take this, or they see us online and think, oh, that looks like a cool place, and it looks like they would treat me right, and
Right.
and looks like they'd be able to sell this guitar.
Also, it's like Norm. He's been in biz so long,
Yeah.
where he sells it to the people, and then eventually they bring it back in. Like, I'm not, I don't collect anymore.
Yeah.
Here you go, and they buy the collection back for way more money than they sold it 20 years to him for.
Yeah, well, that's a big part of the market that some of the older dealers, I think, were a little slow to recognize that, where they just complained that those collectors weren't buying anymore. They didn't realize that those collectors are selling now.
Yeah.
And we benefited from that for a while. I think everybody's catching on now to that.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's where it's at.
Or I wouldn't have mentioned it. I wouldn't have given them the hint here.
Yeah. You ever talk to Norm?
Yeah, occasionally, yeah.
Right.
He's been very ill.
I know.
lately.
We saw him a few weeks
And we
ago.
think
He's back at the shop.
Good.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
It's like I said, it was great to talk to you. One last question: you do own the building, and they bought the business. If you wanted to sell the building, is that possible, or did you just lease the building back to them for a long term?
It's all that's up in the air and negotiable.
Yeah, I
It's-
gotcha.
It's all business things are.
Yeah. I was just curious because one day you're like, "Hey, let's sell the building and retire somewhere," you know? They're like, "Wait a minute."
Yeah. Well, that could happen.
Well, it's you've built something very cool here, and they bought something. They bought a legendary shop. Only 12 years open or something?
10 years.
10
Not
years
even,
open.
Not quite 10. Yeah.
And already legendary.
Well, thanks.
I mean, it's just everybody talks about Carter Vintage all the time.
Well, we were fortunate and we worked hard too.
Yeah, and you've been in the game all your life of guitars. It's pretty cool, man. Well, thank you for talking to me.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Next time I'm in town, you come down and see some comedy?
Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah.
You're funny, aren't you?
It just depends what you're into.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll come out for sure.
Some people like Tellys, some people like Les Pauls.
Yeah. Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
See ya.